She was 23 and homeless. No coat, no room key, no suitcase, just a library card, and $7 she had found folded inside the lining of her winter skirt. And with that $7, she bought a forgotten silhouette cutter's booth outside Newport, County, Rhode Island, last marked on county maps in 1978. Rain had opened a seam along the roof. The profile chair leaned on one split oak leg. The county condemned the booth on October 14, 2022, with demolition planned for spring. But behind the brass backrest of its profile chair waited a sealed compartment, untouched for generations, holding money and faces no history book had kept. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Vera Ellison had been measuring people her whole life without knowing it. As a child in Pawtucket, she learned to judge a room by what remained after the talking stopped. Her father left before she could remember the sound of his voice. Her mother, Marlene, worked hotel laundry shifts and returned each evening smelling of starch, hot metal, and other people's soap. Vera learned not to ask whether the rent was paid until she saw groceries on the counter. Marlene was not cruel. She was simply tired in a way that hardened around the edges. She saved rubber bands, rinsed aluminum foil, and kept every envelope with an unused corner. When Vera brought home a drawing from school, her mother admired the clean white back and used it for a shopping list. The person who taught Vera that paper could hold more than arithmetic was an old street artist named Elias Vale. He worked Saturdays near the Providence Arcade beneath a striped canvas awning, cutting profile portraits for tourists who wanted something quick and old-fashioned. Elias wore a brown wool coat shiny at the elbows and carried a pair of surgical scissors in a leather case softened by 40 years of handling. Vera first noticed him when she was 11, not because of the portraits, but because he had divided his lunch with a pigeon whose foot was twisted. After that, she began bringing him half a sandwich whenever Marlene had packed two. Their ritual lasted nearly a decade. Vera swept the pavement around his chair. Elias set a sheet of black paper against a white backing card, turned his customer sideways toward the afternoon light, and studied the line from brow to chin. He never sketched. His scissors moved in one unbroken path, opening and closing with the faint rhythm of a clock being wound. "Do not cut the face people practice," he told her. "Wait for the face they forget to hold." Vera understood him years later. A true likeness appeared in the instant after a person stopped arranging themselves for judgment. Elias died during a February freeze when Vera was 19. By the time she reached the rented room where he had lived, the landlord had cleared it. His chair, scissors, paper stock ledger, and tin box of finished profiles had been taken with the rubbish. Vera stood beside an empty nail in the wall, while sleet ticked against the window glass. She kept only a single silhouette he had cut of her at 16. The nose was slightly uneven. The chin looked more certain than she felt. 4 years later, Vera rented a narrow apartment in Fall River with a woman named Celeste Marr, who spoke softly enough that every request sounded reasonable. Celeste chose which cupboard shelves belonged to whom, moved Vera's shoes into straight pairs, and counted the eggs after breakfast. She disliked closed doors. She also disliked questions about the envelope where both women placed their share of the rent. "You worry too early," Celeste would say, flattening the envelope beneath a ceramic bowl. On November 3, 2022, Vera came home from her morning shift at a bakery and found the deadbolt changed. Her canvas suitcase sat inside the hall, visible through the narrow wired glass panel, one handle turned toward her, as if someone had placed it there deliberately. Beside it stood the landlord, Mr. Haskins, holding a yellow notice and refusing to open the door. Celeste had vanished 3 nights earlier with $1,200 in rent money and the final month's deposit. Mr. Haskins tapped the notice with one blunt fingernail. "Your roommate stole it. You still owe me." Exactly 8 words. Vera called her mother from the front steps. Marlene listened without interrupting. Behind her silence came the churn of an industrial dryer, then a woman calling for a missing cart. Vera asked whether she could sleep on the sofa for a week. The dryer turned. Marlene breathed once into the receiver and ended the call. By dusk, Mr. Haskins had sealed the apartment under a tenant property dispute. Vera was allowed to take only what she had worn to work: black trousers, bakery shoes, a thin sweater, and the skirt with Elias's silhouette tucked inside its hem. For 6 weeks, she moved south and east according to warmth. She slept 2 nights beneath the concrete stairs of the Fall River bus terminal, waking whenever the cleaning machine passed. In Bristol, she spent 4 nights in the laundry room of a church shelter curled beside a humming boiler, until a volunteer discovered her and offered oatmeal without asking for a name. She crossed into Rhode Island with $41 and reached Providence with 32. A woman's dormitory took her for 9 nights. After that came a bench near India Point Park, a bus shelter on Hope Street, and the back row of an all-night waiting room, where she pretended to study outdated magazines. She washed her socks in public sinks and dried them beneath hand blowers. $12 became 9 after soup and aspirin. 9 became 7 when she paid for a local bus toward Newport and walked the last miles because the driver would not accept an expired transfer. Cold reduced life to exact decisions. Eat now or save the fare. Sleep beneath light or risk the... Keep moving or lose feeling in the feet. On the 42nd morning, Vera entered the Newport Public Library because sleet had begun to fall sideways across Spring Street. She sat near a radiator, whose pipes clicked without giving much heat, and opened the classified notices from the county surplus office. Most listings required deposits she could not imagine. Marine storage sheds, storm-damaged kiosks, a boarded ticket booth near the harbor. At the bottom of the final page, one line had been circled in blue pencil by someone before her. Abandoned portrait cutter's booth. Personal property only. Structure condemned. Sealed bid minimum $7. A grainy photograph showed a narrow wooden stall beneath walnut trees. Black profiles still clung to its interior wall like shadows left by people who had stood up and gone home. Vera held the page closer. The chair in the photograph had a brass head brace. She reached beneath her skirt hem and unfolded Elias Vale's silhouette of her. The paper edge trembled once between her fingers, then became still. At noon, she spent her final coins on a bus ticket, as far as the route would carry her, and wrote the property number across her wrist in library pencil. By nightfall, Vera was walking toward a ruined booth that seemed to remember the shape of her hands. The bus carried Vera east through a morning the color of old tin, its heater breathing weakly along the floor while salt-streaked windows blurred the farms beyond Tiverton. She rode 27 miles before the driver stopped at a crossroads and told her the county route ended there for winter. The property lay 11 miles south along roads between stone walls and sleeping fields. Vera tightened her bakery shoes, tucked the library notice inside her sweater, and began walking. By dusk, sleet had become dry snow. She found an open hay barn beyond Little Compton and climbed behind 3 square bales where the wind could not strike her directly. The temperature fell to 19 degrees. Hay scratched her cheek, and mice worked beneath the boards. She slept in lengths of minutes, waking to stamp feeling into her feet. At first light, she followed West Main Road toward Newport, eating the last heel of bread a shelter volunteer had wrapped in waxed paper. Near town, she passed the Atlantic Grill, Wilbur's General Store, Seaside Stems, Cormac's Marine Repair, and the Blue Lantern Cafe, where a woman set pies behind a steamed window. Vera did not stop. Warmth behind glass could take more strength than cold. The Newport County Clerk's office occupied a brick annex behind the courthouse. Its vestibule smelled of wet wool and floor polish. Vera followed the directory to room 104 and stood before a counter worn pale by sleeves. The clerk had silver hair pinned with 2 black combs and a purple ink stain along her right thumb. Her nameplate read MRS, Edith Bell Property Records. She looked at Vera's shoes, then at the folded notice. You came about parcel S17. Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Bell removed her glasses. You understand it has no residential certificate? Yes, ma'am. The roof has active failure. Yes, ma'am. There is no municipal water, sewer, or electric service. Yes, ma'am. The demolition order transfers with it. Yes, ma'am. The clerk held the glasses between them. And you have $7. Vera placed the bills on the counter. 6 were soft from handling. The last was the dollar found in her skirt lining, still marked by a rust-colored crease. Mrs. Bell opened the deed. The booth was movable commercial property, though the county had not tried to move it in 44 years. Vera signed twice and initialed the condemnation notice. The clerk pressed a brass stamp into red ink and brought it down with both hands. The impact sounded heavier than the price. Take Bellevue Avenue south. Turn after the old stone pump house, then follow Coggeshall Avenue toward Ocean Drive. The path is opposite the second iron gate between 2 walnut trees. She slid the deed forward, but kept one finger on it. Ellison, she said. Was Elias Vale your grandfather? No, he taught me to cut. Mrs. Bell opened a ledger from the shelf behind her. A 1969 permit entry recorded the booth's summer profile work. The witness signature beneath it belonged to Elias Vale. I used to come here, Mrs. Bell said. Cut my sister at 12 before her illness changed her mouth. Vera looked at the signature. The capital E leaned forward, impatient to begin. He never told me about this place. Some places are not spoken of until they can be given away. Mrs. Bell folded the deed along its official crease. From the money she removed the final dollar and placed it beneath her blotter. The register is $6 today, she said. That one can wait. Outside snow had softened to mist. Vera walked south with the deed beneath her sweater. Bellevue Avenue passed dark walls and gates hiding large houses. At Coggeshall, the wind carried salt and the iron smell of water. Near the bend, an elderly man in green rubber boots was pruning dead canes. A yellow dog watched, one ear folded forward. You looking for the cutter's shed? Vera nodded. Path is past my wall. Dog's Locket. She'll follow. Locket kept 6 paces behind, along a track between walnut trees. Their branches clicked over. Beyond them, gulls stood in marsh water facing the wind. The booth emerged as a narrow building pressed against the trees, perhaps 12 by 22 feet. Cedar boards had silvered with age. The rear roof sagged beneath cracked shingles, and a brick chimney leaned through the ridge. Above the door, a sign turned on one rusted chain. Vale and Ellison profile, likenesses cut while you wait. Vera stopped beneath it. Elias had not been an owner yet. His name remained beside a surname that had belonged to Vera before she knew him. The padlock opened with the key taped to the deed. The door resisted until she set her shoulder against it. Damp wood released with a tearing sound, and the room exhaled dust, cold ashes, mouse nests, and the medicinal scent of old paper. Light entered through a cracked front window. Black profiles covered the walls, some framed, others pinned to smoke-browned plaster. Their edges curled outward, and cobwebs joined forehead to forehead. The front room held a counter, 2 stools, and a cast-iron stove. One board snapped near the door. Another groaned beside the stove. Vera crushed dried lavender beneath her shoe and smelled summer for half a breath. The back room held ruined paste jars, damp-fused mounting cards, and a work table. Beside it waited the profile chair, its oak frame leaning and leather headstraps cracked. The brass backrest had greened around the screws but remained solid. Vera touched it. The metal held the cold with an almost living firmness. She found no blanket, only a canvas curtain beneath the counter. She shook out beetle husks, wrapped it around her shoulders, and lay near the stove. Through the roof seam, one drop of melting snow struck a tin tray every 30 seconds. Before sleep, she set Elias's silhouette against the wall among the forgotten faces. A silhouette was not darkness. It was the honest edge of a life. At dawn, Vera carried the tin tray outside. emptied the night's roof water beneath the walnut trees, and followed Lockett's tracks toward the old pump house. The well stood behind a low fieldstone wall, capped with 2 warped boards and a rusted hand pump. Water arose after 37 strokes brown at first, then clear enough to show the scratches inside Vera's cup. She boiled it before drinking. The outhouse leaned north at the edge of the marsh, but its floor remained sound, and the crescent cut into the door admitted a blade of cold daylight. During the first 3 days, she learned the booth by sound. The front board near the threshold cracked sharply beneath weight. A plank beside the stove gave a low complaint. The back room answered with 3 quick creaks when the wind pressed the western wall. At night, those noises ceased to be warnings and became measurements of weather. On the 4th morning, she walked to Wilbur's General Store with the condemned property notice folded in her pocket. The owner, Thomas Wilbur, wore 1 red suspender and 1 blue, both fastened to trousers dusted with saw filings. His store smelled of rope fiber paraffin coffee and the iron drawers of loose screws. A brass bell trembled above the door long after Vera entered. She placed a chimney brush stove, cement lamp oil, work gloves, and a box of matches on the counter. "I cannot pay today," she said. Thomas looked through the window toward the road, as though the answer might be walking past. You own the old profile place." "The county says I do." "Then the county can wait behind me." He opened a ledger and wrote Vera Ellison in narrow block letters. "No interest. Pay when the roof stops leaking." He added a stained copy of Home Repairs for Small Structures to the pile. Its spine had been reinforced with gray tape. "My father bought that in 1956. He argued with every page. The chimney brush cost $8.75 stove cement, $4.20 lamp oil, $3.10 gloves, $5.60, and a pound of cut nails, £6.40. Thomas marked each amount beneath her name but charged nothing for the manual. Back at the booth, Vera opened the chimney chapter and read it on the floor beside the cold stove. The flue could not be trusted until she tested its draft and removed the creosote. She tied a brick to a length of clothesline, lowered it from the roof, and confirmed that the passage was open. Then she climbed with the round wire brush balanced across one shoulder. The shingles shifted beneath her knees. She straddled the ridge, removed the cracked clay cap, and fed the brush downward in short strokes, turning it a quarter circle each time. Black flakes fell into the firebox. Some were dry and brittle. Others clung together like tar. She worked for 5 hours. Twice the brush lodged at the smoke shelf. Vera descended, reached through the stove opening with an iron poker, broke the packed creosote apart, and climbed again. By late afternoon, her sleeves were black to the elbow, and soot had settled into the creases beside her nose. She sealed a narrow crack in the stove collar with cement and left it to harden through the night. The next morning, she held a lit twist of paper beneath the flue. The flame bent upward. She built the first fire with walnut twigs, 2 split cedar scraps, and a handful of shavings from the broken counter. Smoke entered the room for 3 breaths, then gathered itself and rose cleanly. Vera sat on the floor until the iron began ticking with heat. Her first hot meal was oatmeal stirred in a dented enamel cup, salted with a packet saved from the shelter. Steam warmed her face. Outside, the marsh grass bowed beneath a cold rain, but the booth smelled of wood smoke instead of damp plaster. She ate slowly enough to scrape the cup clean. That afternoon, she began sorting the back workroom. She found 2 oval frames with their glass intact, a hand roller for mounting paper, a jar of dried wheat paste, a linen apron stiffened by age, a magnifying lens on a jointed brass arm, 7 packets of black silhouette stock, and a leather scissor case with no scissors inside. Beneath the table lay a foot-operated lamp whose shade still held a smoke-blackened reflector. The profile chair occupied the corner nearest the wall. Its seat was horsehair beneath cracked leather. A narrow brace rose behind it to hold the customer's head steady, though one strap had torn away. Vera removed the dust with a damp cloth and rubbed the brass backrest until letters emerged along the lower rim. M. Ellison, maker, Newport. She ran her thumb over the surname. When she lifted the chair to move it, the rear felt too heavy. The weight did not belong to oak and brass alone. She set one leg down, then raised the other. Something shifted inside the backrest with a muted slide. Vera tapped the wood with the handle of a screwdriver. The left side answered solidly. The center gave the same close sound. Near the right edge came a shallower note, almost hollow. She measured the back with her knuckles tapping from brass rim to oak post until the difference became exact. 4 screws held the brass plate, but the slots were narrow and dark with oxidation. She warmed them with a cloth laid near the stove, added a drop of lamp oil to each, and waited. 3 turned. The 4th refused. Vera pressed too hard and felt the screwdriver slip. It cut the base of her thumb. She wrapped the hand in linen, sat beside the chair, and read the manual's section on seized hardware. The author advised patience before force a sentence Thomas Wilbur's father had underlined twice. She heated the screw again, tapped its head gently, and worked it backward by fractions. The brass plate released. Behind it lay a cedar disc fitted into a round recess. Its grain had darkened almost purple, and a thin leather tab protruded from one side. Vera pulled the tab. The disc came away with a sigh of trapped air. Inside the chair was a chamber the length of her forearm. 3 bundles filled it, each wrapped in oilcloth and tied with linen cord. A flat tin box rested beneath them. There was no dust inside, only the dry smell of cedar metal and old paper. Vera carried everything to the work table. She did not cut the cords. She loosened each knot with a needle from the apron pocket and placed the ties in a straight line. The first package held 2 pairs of small surgical scissors, their blades protected with oiled wool. One pair curved slightly toward the tips. The second had narrow finger bows worn bright by use. The next bundle contained black paper, white mounting cards, and thin sheets of ragboard separated by tissue. Though the outer edges had browned, the centers remained dry. Vera lifted one black sheet toward the window. It was dense and matte, made to take a clean blade without showing fibers along the cut. The third package was a ledger. Its leather cover had softened, but not cracked. Hundreds of silhouettes had been mounted inside, each no larger than a hand. Beneath them appeared names, places, occupations, and dates written in different inks. Anna Reed, washerwoman, St. Chedard 68. Samuel Pike, dock porter, somebody 1. Moses Green, formerly enslaved, no birth year known. Eliza and Ruth Bell, sisters, seamstresses. Some entries had no surname. Several bore only a first name and the words "unable to pay." None had been crossed out. Vera closed the book before turning another page. The tin box required no key. Its lid had been sealed with wax, now brittle enough to break beneath the pressure of her thumbnail. Inside lay paper currency wrapped in bank bands, 4 small cloth sacks, a military medal, and an envelope addressed in brown ink. The bills were arranged by denomination. Vera counted them once, then again, placing each band at the far edge of the table. 10s, 20s, 50s, and 100s had been added across many years. Some were old enough that she checked the portraits twice. The paper money came to exactly $33,400. The first cloth sack held Indian head cents. The second held barber dimes. In the third were Liberty head nickels, and in the fourth, silver $half darkened at the rims. Vera did not calculate their value. Their dates seemed more important than their price. The medal was a purple heart, engraved on the reverse. Jonathan Ellison, Stansforce. Its ribbon had faded to the color of dried violets. The envelope remained on the table. Vera recognized the handwriting before she touched it. The capital letters leaned forward. The lower loops were narrow, and the crossbars were drawn with one quick motion. Elias Vale had written her name on only two things in her life: the back of her silhouette and a paper sack containing his surgical scissors on the day he first trusted her to carry them. This envelope did not bear her name. It read, "My dear one, whoever you are." Vera placed the money back in the tin and laid the metal across the closed ledger. She set the unopened letter beside them, weighted at one corner with the cedar disc. Night came before she lit the lamp. She stepped through the front door and walked beyond the walnut trees to the marsh. The wind had cleared the clouds, and water reflected a narrow moon broken by reeds. Behind her, the booth gave off one small square of amber light. She stood there until her injured hand began to ache beneath the linen. A silhouette was not darkness. It was the honest edge of a life. Morning entered through the cracked front window in a pale bar that reached the work table before it reached Vera. She washed her face at the pump-wrapped fresh linen around her thumb and returned while the stove was still cold. The envelope lay exactly where she had left it, beneath the cedar disc. In daylight, there was no doubt. Elias formed the capital M with a deep first stroke, as though every letter required a foundation. Vera broke the seal with the tip of the curved scissors. "My dear one, whoever you are, if you have opened the chair, then the booth has outlived me, and perhaps you have outlived something too. I hope you came here by choice. I suspect you did not. Dr. Miriam Cole at Rhode Island Hospital in Providence told me on March 8, 1991, that the cancer had entered my liver, and that a careful man should arrange his papers. I have never been a careful man with papers, but I have been careful with faces." The Ellison line began here with Mercy Ellison, born in Newport in 1841, who learned silhouette cutting from her father Nathaniel, a sign painter near Long Wharf. Her daughter Clara kept this booth from 1876 until 1912. Clara's son Matthew carried the scissors to New Bedford in 1917, then returned after losing his right hand in the Meuse-Argonne fighting of the First World War. His daughter Lenora reopened the trade in 1922. Lenora's son Jonathan, my closest friend, died in France in 1944. I inherited the chair because there was no one left who would keep it dry. The trade closed on September 17, 1950 noon. For more than 30 years, I came here alone each autumn. I oiled the hinges, changed the roof buckets, and added what money I could. I kept the poor faces because the wealthy carried their portraits home in frames. Washerwomen, porters, cooksmen, born into slavery, widows, who counted pennies before sitting down, they deserved a record no less exact. If you mean to cut again, remember this. Sit the subject 3 feet from the lamp and turn the face until the far eyelash disappears. Warm wheat paste to about 110 degrees, never boiling, and mix 1 part paste with 4 parts water for mounting. Let black paper rest in the room for 20 minutes before cutting, or winter dryness will split the edge. Keep the lower scissor blade still and move the paper, not your wrist. A likeness should take 2 minutes, but do not hurry the final line beneath the chin. The money is not a prize. It is unpaid labor returned to the work. Use what keeps rain from the paper, heat in the stove, and food in the body. Keep the ledger together. Each face was made by a hand that understood being overlooked. Inheritance is not what a person owns. It is the work they refuse to let disappear. The house is not empty. It has been waiting. You are welcome here. Elias Nathaniel Vale, October 2. Vera read the letter twice. The first time she held it upright. The second, she laid it flat and followed each line with one finger, stopping at Jonathan's name, and again at the date the trade had closed. Then she folded the pages along their original creases, making no new ones, and returned them to the envelope. On the final page, Elias had drawn a small map. Vera went through the back door with a shovel from beside the outhouse. The map marked 6 paces from the western wall and 2 from the split walnut stump. Beneath 4 inches of frozen soil, the blade struck stone. She cleared a flat slate marker no larger than a serving tray. Jonathan Matthew Ellison kept the line true. No body lay there. A smaller inscription said, "Buried at Colleville-sur-Mer, France." Vera knelt and brushed soil from the letters with her unbandaged hand. The Purple Heart rested in her apron pocket. She placed it on the slate for 1 minute, long enough for the metal to take the cold, then carried it inside again. From the first package, she selected the older pair of surgical scissors. She cleaned the blades with lamp oil and a strip torn from the least damaged linen. At the stove, she warmed a pea-sized piece of beeswax found in the tin box, touched it to the pivot, and opened the scissors once. The sound was quiet and exact. That evening, she considered the people who had carried her farther than $7 should have allowed. Mrs. Alvarez at the Bristol shelter had slid 2 boiled eggs into her coat pocket without recording them. A bus driver named Leon had waited while she searched the pavement for her transfer. Thomas Wilbur had opened a ledger instead of closing his door. Mrs. Bell had kept 1 worn dollar beneath her blotter and called it patience. None of them had changed her life alone. Together they had kept it from closing. Before this story moves on, remember one small kindness someone once gave you when they had no reason to. Tell us what it was if you can. A meal, a door held open at the right hour. Sometimes the giver never learns how far the act traveled. Vera fed 2 walnut splits into the stove and placed the ledger, the scissors, and Elias's letter beside her bedroll. The tin box remained beneath the work table, closed, but no longer hidden. That night, she slept with one hand resting on the leather cover, as though keeping hundreds of forgotten faces from being carried away again. The first snow arrived on December 2, 2022, laying 4 inches across the sagging roof and whitening the walnut branches until they looked drawn in chalk. Vera read the roofing chapter 3 times beside the stove. Then she measured the booth, 12 feet wide, 22 feet long, with 2 roof planes rising 9 feet from eave to ridge. Allowing for overlap and waste, she calculated 8 bundles of cedar shingles, 2 rolls of 30-pound felt, and 6 pounds of galvanized nails. Thomas Wilbur delivered the materials in his truck. Before leaving, he set a roofing hatchet on the counter. Its square pole was worn smooth, and the leather grip had been repaired with copper wire. My brother used it 30 years. Vera tried to return it. He will not be needing it. The following morning, Silas Mott appeared carrying a ladder over one shoulder. He was 72, broad through the chest, and missing the tip of his left index finger. He had roofed houses from Jamestown to Portsmouth before his knees ended the work. Vera told him she could not pay. Then do not waste my daylight. They stripped the old shingles in rows, saving every board that still held a nail. One rear rafter had split beside the chimney. Silas showed her how to sister it, with a straight length of pine bolted 6 inches beyond the damaged wood at both ends. They snapped a chalk line across the felt and worked upward from the eaves. Silas drove each nail with 3 strokes, 1 to set, 1 to seat, 1 light tap, to bring the head flush without bruising the cedar. That nail's proud. Vera examined the raised head. Pull it. She did. For 11 days, they climbed before the frost lifted and stopped, when the shingles became too slick to trust. Silas accepted coffee but no money. On December 15th, Vera fixed the ridge cap beneath a clear afternoon sky. That night, rain crossed Newport and no tin tray sounded beside her bed. January exposed the chimney. Warmth from the new fires loosened the outer face of several bricks. Their surfaces flaked beneath Vera's fingers and mortar powdered onto the stove like pale flour. Thomas brought hydraulic lime fire clay and a narrow pointing trowel. She mixed 3 parts washed sand, 1 part hydraulic lime, and half a part fire clay, adding water until the mortar held a thumbprint without slumping. Silas showed her how to rake the failed joints 2 inches deep and dampen the bricks before packing them. For 3 weeks, temperatures remained in the 20s. Vera worked barehanded because gloves could not feel the depth of the joint. Every 15 minutes, her fingers went numb. She warmed them around the stovepipe, waited for the ache to return, and began again. One brick above the smoke chamber crumbled as she removed it. Thomas found a salvaged replacement behind his store, darker than the others, but close in size. Vera bedded it carefully, trimmed the joint, and covered the repair with damp burlap so the lime would cure slowly. On January 29th, she built a test fire from newspaper cedar and one dry walnut split. She watched from outside while the smoke rose from the chimney in a narrow gray column. It drew clean. The floors weighted beneath soot paste and a dark finish worn nearly black. The planks were white pine wide enough to remember old trees fastened with hand-cut rose-head nails. Vera sank every raised nail with a punch before renting a random orbit sander from Thomas for $14 a day. The first pass used 80 grit paper and removed the ruined surface. The second, at 120, erased the coarse swirls. The final pass, at 220, left the boards soft beneath her palm without rounding their edges. She vacuumed twice, wiped the floor with mineral spirits, and applied the first coat of oil with a folded linen pad. 2 more coats followed, each drawn thin along the grain. Then she closed the door and allowed 48 hours for the finish to cure. The color changed from dark honey toward mahogany, though the wood was still pine. Old footpaths remained visible where visitors had approached the chair, sat for 2 minutes, and stepped away, carrying their likeness. One morning, Vera woke unable to lift the sander. She carried coffee to the marsh and sat on a flat stone. A great blue heron stood in the shallow, motionless except when the wind lifted the feathers along its back. Vera watched it for nearly 3 hours. She did no work that day. The boards remained where they were. In February, she turned to the 8 windows. 3 had no glass. 4 were cracked from sash to corner. The last held one original pane dated in the property ledger to 1788, its surface wavering with small trapped bubbles. Vera removed that pane first, wrapped it in wool, and stored it upright beneath the work table until its sash was repaired. She scraped the old glazing with a warmed putty knife, taking care not to gouge the narrow muntins. The replacement panes came from salvaged window glass Thomas kept behind his lumber racks. None were perfectly clear which made them belong. Vera rolled DAP 33 glazing putty between her palms into cords, pressed each cord firmly into the rabbet, set the glass against it, and fixed the pane with small glazing points. A second line of putty sealed the exterior edge. She drew the knife at a steady angle so the bevel shed water and met the inside sightline cleanly. 4 sash cords had rotted through. She replaced them with 1/4-inch cotton cord fed each length over the pulley and tied a figure-8 knot before lowering the counterweight into its pocket. The first sash dropped crooked. Vera opened the casing again and shortened the left cord by 1/2 inch. By the 8th window, her hands knew the sequence without the manual. She returned the 1788 pane to the front room on the final afternoon of February. While she pressed the last line of putty beneath the lower rail, a chickadee landed on the walnut branch outside. It tilted its black-capped head toward the glass. Vera held the knife still until the bird flew. 2 winters later, in December 2024, Vera completed her first full silhouette beneath the restored lamp. The sitter was Doris Bell from the Blue Lantern Cafe, who arrived in her flour-dusted apron and refused to remove it. Vera placed the chair 3 feet from the light, turned Doris until the far eyelash vanished, and lifted the curved surgical scissors. She kept the lower blade still. The paper moved through her fingers in one continuous path: forehead bridge, upper lip, chin, apron collar, and the loose strand of hair Doris always pushed behind her left ear. 1 minute and 53 seconds later, Vera opened the folded black sheet. 2 identical profiles faced one another across the crease. Doris stared at them, then touched the loose strand near her ear. "You kept the part I forget." Vera mounted one copy on ragboard and gave it to her. The other entered the ledger beneath the date and the words "payment refused." By then, the booth held warmth without smoke and light without drafts. The pine floor carried a deep brown sheen. 8 repaired windows caught the marsh in uneven glass, and the original pane softened every passing figure at its edges. Elias's letter remained framed above the work table, not for visitors to read, but where Vera could see the final sentence whenever she put away the scissors. The brass key had waited on the mantel since she found it wedged inside a small oak box beneath the 3rd cellar step. For nearly 2 years, it opened nothing. Then, while clearing dead bark from the older walnut tree, Vera uncovered a narrow brass plate set into the trunk above the root flare. Its keyhole had been hidden beneath a wooden plug carved to resemble a knot. The key turned once. A shallow compartment opened inside the tree. It had been lined with tin and sealed with beeswax. Within it lay a folded 48-star flag dry, despite decades of coastal rain, and a note written on thin blue paper. Vera Ellison had signed it on October 9, 1918, while her son Matthew served with the American Expeditionary Forces in France. She wrote that the flag had flown above the booth on the morning his unit sailed. She had lowered it before sunset because she could not bear to watch the wind pull at the stars. If Matthew returned, he was to raise it himself. If he did not, the next keeper should preserve it not as proof of glory, but as evidence that someone had waited for him. Matthew returned without his right hand. The flag was never raised again. Vera folded the note along its weakened lines and placed both objects in an acid-free box. She left this compartment in the walnut tree empty except for a square of cedar so the lock would not rust shut. On November 11, 2024, she carried Jonathan Ellison's Purple Heart to the Rhode Island Veterans Memorial Cemetery in Exeter. A groundskeeper named Mr. Sosa helped her place it beside the memorial register during the 11 o'clock observance. There was no speech. Vera stood through the silence, then took the medal home before rain reached the open case. She used only 4 coins from the chair. 1 barber dime bought a square of archival linen from a collector who accepted its silver value rather than its rarity. A Liberty head nickel paid for the first packet of fresh black paper. 2 Indian head cents were set beneath the new threshold, heads facing inward. An old carpenter's custom Silas insisted would keep the door honest. The paper money paid for shingles, lime, glass, fuel food, and the county inspection fee. Vera kept exact receipts, what remained including nearly every coin returned to the tin box. She wrapped the box in oilcloth, placed it behind the brass chair plate, and added a note. For the next one, use only what keeps the work alive. The shop reopened without a newspaper notice or painted banner. Doris pinned an index card to the cafe corkboard. Profile likenesses Saturdays 10 to 4, 2 minutes of stillness required. The first week brought 3 customers. The second brought 1. By spring, more than 40 names had been written on a mailing list kept in a flour-stained notebook near the cafe register. Vera scheduled only as many sittings as the daylight allowed. She charged modestly. Anyone unable to pay entered the ledger with the same dignity as those who could. Caleb Wilbur returned one April afternoon on the old Schwinn bicycle he had ridden while helping split firewood during the restoration. He was taller now, though his coat sleeves had not caught up. Across the bicycle frame he had tied a hand-carved walnut sign, Vale and Ellison profile, likenesses and daughters. Vera read the final words twice. "There are no daughters," she said. Caleb leaned the sign against the counter. Not yet. He had carved the added letters slightly smaller than the rest, leaving room beneath them. Vera ran her thumb through the fresh grooves. "Your spacing is uneven. My grandfather said you would notice." She mounted the sign above the door anyway. That evening, after the final customer had gone, Vera opened a sheet of cream writing paper and sharpened a pencil with a small knife. The ledger rested to her left. Elias's scissors lay closed to her right. She began, "My dear one, whoever you are, She wrote that the roof had held through 2 hurricanes and that the old pane still trembled when trucks passed on Ocean Drive. She explained how to warm wheat paste, how to recognize paper that had become too dry, and how to stop cutting before certainty turned into vanity. She did not write about rescue. She wrote about maintenance. She wrote that a person might arrive with nothing except a surname, an unfinished skill, or the strength to open one more door. The next keeper did not need to resemble the last. The work asked only for honest hands and the patience to preserve the faces others overlooked. Before folding the letter, Vera looked at the wall where dock workers, cooks, children, widows, tourists, and people unable to pay now shared the same quiet space. A silhouette was not darkness. It was the honest edge of a life. She placed her letter in a new envelope, but did not seal it. There were years left to add roof repairs, not yet needed names, not yet entered, and a key whose next lock had not been made. Outside the marsh darkened beneath a thin moon. Vera closed the shutters, covered the scissors, and left one dry walnut split beside the stove for morning. The Silhouette Scissor Cutter's booth waits. It has always waited. At the county clerk's office, Mrs. Bell retired with little ceremony. Her replacement found an old dollar bill beneath the blotter while clearing the desk. A rust-colored crease crossed its center. Mrs. Bell took it from his hand, returned it to the drawer, and closed the drawer gently. "Leave that one," she said. "It is still working."
The Heroic Veteran Dogs is a fictional channel created to entertain, educate, and inspire the audience by exploring the deep, loyal bond between veterans and their dogs. All channel content does not represent real individuals, actual events, or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals, or events is entirely coincidental.